A husband threw a cake in his wife's face at an upscale restaurant after she refused to cover the bill. What happened next left everyone in shock. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Naomi Harper entered the Grand Aurora Hall, the soft click of her heels echoing off the polished marble floors. The room shimmered with luxury, an array of dazzling gowns and finely tailored suits. The air was rich with the scent of hors d'oeuvres mingled with notes of jasmine and amber from designer perfumes. This was Naomi's world: high society galas, charity events, and networking mixers. She navigated the crowd effortlessly, offering polite smiles and nods to familiar faces. But behind her poised demeanor, a familiar ache lingered, a sense of being seen not as an individual, but as a symbol of her family's prestige. Naomi's father, Victor Harper, had built a financial empire from scratch, and her mother, Vivian, was a celebrated art curator. Naomi had inherited their sharp intellect and discerning taste, but she had also inherited the immense weight of their legacy. Every milestone she achieved as a financial consultant was dismissed by skeptics as nepotism, and every mistake was magnified under the scrutiny of those waiting for her to stumble. As she reached for a glass of champagne from a passing tray, her attention caught on a man across the room. He was tall, with striking features and a quiet confidence that set him apart from the practiced airs of the room. His gaze met hers, and he offered a crooked, genuine smile that quickened her pulse. "You must be Naomi Harper," he said smoothly as he approached, extending a hand. His voice was warm, carrying an edge of playful mischief. "You're not an easy woman to miss." Naomi tilted her head, intrigued. "And you are?" "Ethan Marshall," he replied with a grin, shaking her hand. "Just a humble architect trying to blend in at one of these fancy galas." Naomi chuckled, feeling the tension of the evening ease. His relaxed charm was a refreshing contrast to the stiff formalities she was used to. They spent the evening engrossed in conversation, bonding over their shared love of modern art and urban landscapes. Ethan spoke with passion about his work revitalizing community spaces, and Naomi found herself captivated by his vision. Over the following weeks, Ethan became a regular part of her life. He seemed unaffected by her wealth or status, at least that's what she believed. He made her laugh, listened to her frustrations, and treated her like a person rather than a brand. Despite her growing feelings, her inner circle was wary. Her best friend, Clara, voiced her concerns openly. "Naomi, he's charming, I'll give you that," Clara admitted. "But something feels off. He's trying too hard, like he has something to prove." Naomi waved her off. "Not everyone has an agenda, Clara. Maybe he just likes me for who I am." Her parents were more subtle but equally skeptical. At a dinner in their stately home, Victor asked Ethan pointed questions about his career and ambitions. Though Ethan answered smoothly, Naomi noticed his jaw tighten when the interrogation ended. Later that evening, he laughed it off. "I'm not here to win your dad's approval," he said, brushing it aside. "I'm here for you." Naomi was smitten. Ethan proposed less than a year after they met, and she accepted without hesitation. Their wedding was a grand affair in the lush gardens of her family's estate. Naomi left no detail to chance, crafting a picture-perfect day. Ethan, however, seemed more preoccupied with the guest list, insisting on inviting influential figures he claimed could advance his business. On the surface, their relationship appeared idyllic, but cracks were beginning to show. During the wedding planning, Ethan clashed with Naomi over every detail, accusing her of being controlling whenever she disagreed. The morning of the wedding, as Naomi stood in the bridal suite adjusting her veil, her mother's voice broke the silence. "Naomi, darling," Vivian said gently, "are you sure about this? You don't have to go through with it if you're having doubts." Naomi shook her head, forcing a smile. "It's just pre-wedding jitters, Mom. Ethan's a good man, he loves me." Vivian sighed but said nothing more, her expression unreadable. The ceremony was breathtaking, a fairy tale brought to life. As Naomi stood beside Ethan under an arch of roses exchanging vows, she silenced the quiet doubts in her heart, choosing instead to believe in the future they were building together. Naomi thought this was her moment, a partnership built on love and mutual respect, or so she believed. As the reception wound down and the guests trickled away, she noticed Ethan animatedly chatting with a group of unfamiliar men. Curious, she drifted close enough to overhear snippets of their conversation. Her heart sank when she realized he was using the wedding to pitch his projects. Her chest tightened with unease, but she pushed the feeling aside. It's his way of contributing, she told herself. His way of proving he belongs in my world. That night, as they boarded the plane for their honeymoon, Ethan squeezed her hand tightly, whispering promises of a future brimming with love and adventure. Naomi wanted to believe him. She needed to believe that she'd made the right choice. But as the plane climbed higher, leaving behind the world she knew, a quiet voice in the back of her mind questioned if she was heading toward happiness or disaster. Determined to silence her doubts, she reminded herself that love was about compromise. She just didn't yet know how much compromise would be required, or how high the cost would be. The honeymoon began in Florence, a city Naomi had always adored for its timeless romance and charm. Strolling hand in hand along the Arno River, exploring hidden piazzas, and indulging in exquisite Italian cuisine, everything felt like a dream. Ethan was attentive, affectionate, and as charismatic as ever. He made her laugh with his clumsy attempts at speaking Italian, and listened intently as she shared childhood memories of visiting Italy with her parents. For a brief moment, Naomi let herself believe in the fairy tale. She convinced herself that her earlier doubts were nothing but pre-wedding jitters, amplified by her friends and family's concerns. Ethan loved her, and she was determined to make their marriage work. But cracks began to appear even before their luggage was fully unpacked. On their second night in Florence, Naomi slipped into a sleek black dress paired with elegant heels, a gift from her mother. She felt radiant, confident. Ethan smiled when he saw her, but his words carried a faint sting. "You look amazing," he said, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. "But don't you think it's a bit much? You might draw the wrong kind of attention." Naomi's confidence wavered. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. He shrugged, his tone light. "Nothing, babe. You're stunning. I just don't want people to think you're trying too hard." It was a small comment, almost inconsequential, but it lingered with her all evening. She found herself second-guessing her outfit and questioning if she had overdone it. Meanwhile, Ethan seemed entirely at ease, joking with the waitstaff and ordering her meal without asking for her input. As the honeymoon progressed, Naomi began noticing a pattern. Ethan's remarks about her choices, her clothes, makeup, even the way she spoke to strangers, became more frequent. "You're too friendly," he said one afternoon after she struck up a conversation with a shopkeeper. "Not everyone deserves your time." At first, Naomi brushed off his words as protective concern, but his comments began to carry an undercurrent of criticism. They weren't overtly cruel, but they made her feel as though she was constantly falling short of some invisible standard. Returning home, real life set in. Naomi threw herself into work, excited to lead a new project that could redefine her firm's approach to ethical investing. Over dinner, she shared her ideas with Ethan, expecting encouragement. Instead, he barely looked up from his phone. "Sounds complicated," he said, his tone dismissive. "Don't you ever get tired of all that stress? I mean, you don't have to work, we're doing fine." The words stung. Naomi's career wasn't just a job, it was a passion, a part of who she was. She tried to explain this to Ethan, but he waved her off, steering the conversation towards something trivial. For the first time, Naomi felt a gulf between them, a distance she couldn't quite bridge. Over the next few months, Ethan's true nature began to reveal itself. He insisted on taking control of their finances, claiming it was his role as her husband. At first, Naomi didn't mind, she trusted him. But soon, she noticed troubling signs, unauthorized withdrawals from their joint account and expensive purchases he hadn't mentioned. When she confronted him, Ethan laughed it off. "Relax, Naomi. I'm just making some investments. You'll thank me when they pay off." She wanted to believe him, but unease settled in her stomach. His purchases continued, and his explanations grew increasingly vague. "It's business," he'd say whenever she pressed for details. "You wouldn't understand." Ethan also began to distance her from her loved ones. He made excuses to avoid family dinners, claiming her parents didn't respect him. "They've never liked me," he said, planting seeds of doubt in her mind. "They think I'm not good enough for you." Naomi defended him at first, but deep down she couldn't ignore the truth. Her parents' reservations had merit. Ethan planted seeds of doubt in Naomi's mind, repeating, "They think I'm not good enough for you." At first, Naomi defended him, reassuring herself that her parents' reservations were overly cautious. Yet deep down, she couldn't ignore the truth. Her father, Victor, was always polite but reserved in Ethan's presence, while her mother, Vivian, couldn't hide the subtle tension in her expression whenever money came up in conversation. Still, Naomi began to drift further from her parents, unwilling to face the discomfort of their interactions. Her friendships also began to suffer. Clara, her best friend, was the first to notice. "You've been distant lately," Clara said one afternoon over coffee. "Is everything okay with Ethan?" Naomi hesitated before forcing a smile. "Everything's fine. He's been busy with work and so have I." Clara didn't look convinced. "Naomi, you know I'm here if you ever need to talk." Naomi nodded but didn't take her up on the offer. It wasn't just about sparing Clara the burden, it was admitting to herself that things weren't perfect at home. Over time, Ethan's behavior became increasingly controlling. He criticized her choices relentlessly. The way she dressed, the people she spent time with, and even how she conducted herself in meetings. "You're too direct," he said one evening, after Naomi recounted a tough negotiation with a client. "People don't like that. It makes you seem aggressive." The word hit her like a slap. Aggressive was a label Naomi had fought against her entire life. A stereotype often used to diminish strong, successful women like her. She tried to shrug it off, but it gnawed at her confidence. As the weeks turned into months, Naomi began to feel like a stranger in her own life. She still excelled at work, but her victories felt hollow. At home, she tiptoed around Ethan, afraid that a single misstep would provoke his criticism. Her once thriving social life dwindled to sporadic texts and rare meetups, always cut short by Ethan's disapproval. The breaking point came on a quiet Sunday morning. As Naomi sorted through their mail, she came across a bank statement for an account she didn't recognize. Her stomach dropped as she read the alarming balance and frequent withdrawals. Ethan had been funneling money from their joint account into this one without her knowledge. Heart pounding, Naomi confronted him, holding the statement in trembling hands. Ethan didn't deny it. Instead, he turned the blame on her. "I'm doing this for us," he said, his voice rising. "You're too naive to understand how the real world works. I'm protecting our future." Naomi felt something snap inside her. For too long, she had let Ethan dictate the terms of their relationship, chipping away at her autonomy and self-worth. She realized then that the man she had fallen in love with no longer existed, if he ever had. But leaving wouldn't be easy. Ethan had entangled himself in every corner of her life, and Naomi knew he wouldn't let go without a fight. A seed of resolve took root in her heart. She didn't yet know how or when, but one thing was clear. She couldn't live like this any longer. Sitting at her desk at work, Naomi's eyes scanned over financial reports, but the numbers blurred into incomprehensible patterns. Her mind was elsewhere, on Ethan, on their last argument, and on the growing weight of unease that seemed to follow her everywhere. Naomi had always prided herself on her ability to compartmentalize, to keep her personal life from interfering with her professional one. But now, the walls she'd built around her mind were crumbling. At home, Ethan's behavior grew more oppressive. The subtle, dismissive comments escalated into outright criticisms. He stopped pretending to care about her career, dismissing her achievements as mere luck or attributing them to her family's influence. "You're married now," he snapped one evening. "Your focus should be on us, not your job." Naomi tried to explain that her career was a vital part of who she was, something that gave her purpose and fulfillment. But Ethan brushed her off as though her words were meaningless. One evening over dinner, Ethan brought up their finances again. He insisted that managing the household budget was his duty as the husband. At first, Naomi had agreed. She trusted him. But over time, she began noticing troubling patterns. Ethan made large purchases without consulting her. A designer watch, bespoke suits, and even a luxury car that suddenly appeared in their driveway. When Naomi questioned him about it, his responses were vague and dismissive. "I'm investing in our future," he said, waving her concerns aside. "You wouldn't understand." But Naomi did understand. Something was deeply wrong. Naomi's unease grew as she discovered more troubling inconsistencies. Bank statements revealed significant withdrawals she couldn't explain, and her personal savings were dwindling. One day, while sorting through their mail, she came across a credit card statement in Ethan's name. Her stomach dropped when she saw the balance. He had maxed out the card on extravagant expenses, lavish dinners, luxurious gifts, and trips she hadn't been part of. When Naomi confronted him, Ethan's reaction was swift and cutting. "You don't trust me, do you?" he spat, his voice rising. "You're undermining my role as the man of this house." His words were sharp and deliberate, each one aimed at her self-esteem. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" he accused, his face twisted in anger. "You wouldn't have this life if it weren't for your parents' money. You don't know the first thing about real work." Naomi was stunned into silence. She had always known Ethan could be sharp-tongued, but this was venomous. She wanted to respond, to remind him of her accomplishments and hard work, but the words caught in her throat. Deep down, a part of her had started to believe him. The isolation followed quickly. Ethan began finding excuses to avoid her parents, claiming they looked down on him. He discouraged Naomi from attending social gatherings, calling them pointless distractions. When she managed to meet friends, he would sulk or bombard her with calls, demanding to know when she'd be home. Her best friend, Clara, was the first to notice the change. "Naomi, you're not yourself," Clara said during one of their rare coffee dates. "You used to be so vibrant, so confident. What's going on?" Naomi forced a smile, brushing off Clara's concern. "It's just work," she lied. "Things have been stressful lately." Clara didn't look convinced, but she didn't push the issue. Still, her words lingered in Naomi's mind, cracking the carefully constructed facade she had built around her marriage. At work, Naomi's performance began to falter. She missed deadlines, forgot important meetings, and struggled to concentrate. Her colleagues noticed and expressed concern, but Naomi deflected their questions, blaming the pressures of her personal life. She felt trapped, suffocated by Ethan's control and her own silence. The turning point came one afternoon, when Naomi came home early from work. She found Ethan in his office, hunched over his computer, too engrossed to notice her. As she approached, she saw the screen. An email exchange with a luxury travel agency arranging a trip to the Maldives. Her name wasn't mentioned anywhere. "Who's the trip for?" Naomi asked, her voice calm but edged with steel. Ethan jumped, quickly slamming his laptop shut. His expression shifted from surprise to anger in an instant. "Why are you snooping around?" he demanded. "You have no right to invade my privacy." Naomi didn't back down. "I have every right to know how you're spending our money." "Our money?" Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "Don't kid yourself, Naomi. This is my money. I've been the one keeping us afloat while you play at being some big-shot career woman." His words cut deeper than she expected. For years, Naomi had worked tirelessly to prove herself, overcoming stereotypes and relentless expectations. Hearing Ethan dismiss her accomplishments so easily was a blow to everything she had built. The confrontation escalated. Ethan accused her of being ungrateful and disrespectful, then stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Naomi stood in the empty hallway, her hands trembling and her mind racing. In that moment, she realized just how much of herself she had lost. She had allowed Ethan to chip away at her confidence, isolate her from her loved ones, and control every facet of her life. And for what? To keep the peace? To prove her marriage was worth saving. That night, Naomi lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about the woman she used to be, strong, independent, unafraid to take risks. She thought about her parents, who had taught her to value herself and never settle for less. She thought about Clara, who had seen through her facade even when Naomi refused to. By morning, a seed of resolve had been planted. She didn't know how or when, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't live like this anymore. Naomi smoothed the fabric of her emerald green dress, taking one last look in the mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, poised but uneasy. The dress was stunning, a birthday gift from her mother. But tonight, it felt like armor. This evening was her chance to confront the truth, to take the first step toward reclaiming her life. Naomi decided it was time to confront the truth she had been avoiding for far too long. She chose an upscale restaurant in the city, one of those exclusive places where reservations were booked months in advance. With its dim lighting, flawless service, and a menu that rivaled the art on its walls, she hoped the setting would ease the tension and encourage Ethan to engage in an honest conversation. When Ethan arrived, he was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit Naomi hadn't seen before, undoubtedly one of his recent indulgences. He greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Naomi couldn't help but notice the way his gaze lingered on her dress, followed by a faint smirk. "You look expensive," he said, pulling out his chair. Naomi forced a smile, brushing off the comment. "Thank you for coming tonight. I thought it would be nice to have a quiet evening together." Ethan nodded and signaled to the waiter without even glancing at the menu. "We've both been so busy. It's good to catch up." The waiter arrived, and Ethan ordered an extravagant bottle of wine, making the decision without consulting Naomi. She hesitated, but chose not to comment, letting him take the lead, at least for now. The conversation began harmlessly enough. Ethan launched into stories about his recent meetings with potential investors, peppered with subtle boasts about his connections. Naomi listened politely, but her mind began to drift. His tone, his rehearsed manner, the way he spoke, it all felt like a performance, as though he were playing to an invisible audience. When the first course arrived, Ethan turned his attention to her. "So," he said, swirling his wine, "how's work? Still playing the corporate game?" Naomi set her fork down, her stomach tightening. "It's been challenging but rewarding. We just launched a new initiative on sustainable investments, something I've been passionate about for a long time." Ethan shrugged. "Sounds noble, but don't you ever get tired of it? All the stress, the long hours? You don't need to work, we're doing just fine without it." Naomi inhaled deeply, willing herself to stay calm. "My work isn't just about money, Ethan. It's about purpose. It's important to me." Ethan leaned back in his chair, smirking slightly. "Of course it is. You've always been so driven. But don't you think it's time to focus on other things? Like building a family? You're not getting any younger, Naomi." The words landed like a blow, sharp and cutting. Naomi felt a flush of anger and embarrassment rising, but Ethan seemed completely at ease, as if his statement had been perfectly innocent. "I didn't realize my career and our future were mutually exclusive," she replied evenly, her voice carefully controlled. Ethan waved a dismissive hand. "I'm just saying you don't have anything to prove anymore. You've already accomplished more than most people ever will. Maybe it's time to slow down and enjoy life." Naomi opened her mouth to respond, but the waiter appeared with the main course, interrupting the moment. She glanced down at the beautifully plated dish, the perfection of its presentation, mocking the chaos of her thoughts. As the meal continued, Ethan dominated the conversation, recounting his latest networking triumphs and plans for an upcoming business trip. Naomi nodded along, barely listening. Her mind raced, every passing moment solidifying the realization that their relationship was irreparable. When the waiter brought the dessert menu, Naomi decided to test her growing suspicions. She leaned back in her chair, meeting Ethan's gaze with quiet determination. "Why don't you handle the bill tonight?" she asked casually. "You've been so generous lately. It's my turn to let you take care of things." Ethan froze, his fork suspended mid-air. For a moment, his polished facade cracked, revealing a flicker of irritation. He quickly recovered, letting out a short laugh. "Naomi, come on. You know I don't carry that kind of cash around. Besides, you're the one who wanted to come here." Naomi tilted her head slightly, her voice calm but firm. "I thought it would be nice to treat you for once. Or, do you mean to say you can't?" The air grew heavy with tension. Ethan's jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed. "What are you trying to prove?" he hissed, his voice low but venomous. "You're really going to pull this stunt here, in front of all these people?" Naomi didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to prove anything, Ethan. I just thought it would be fair." Ethan's anger erupted. He slammed his fork onto the table, the sharp clatter drawing the attention of nearby diners. His face was flushed, his carefully curated charm replaced with raw fury. "Fair?" he spat. "You want to talk about fair? Everything I've done for you, for this marriage, and this is how you repay me? You think you're better than me because of your parents' money? You're pathetic." The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on their table. Naomi sat motionless, humiliation threatening to wash over her, but she refused to let it take hold. She met Ethan's glare with calm defiance, her voice steady but resolute. "This isn't about money, Ethan. It's about respect, and it's clear I'm not going to find that here." Ethan's face contorted with rage. Without warning, he grabbed the dessert plate in front of him, a meticulously crafted chocolate tart, and hurled it at her. The plate shattered, the dessert splattering across her dress and face. Gasps rippled through the restaurant as diners recoiled in shock. Naomi sat frozen for a moment, chocolate dripping from her cheek. Then, slowly, she stood, wiping her face with deliberate precision. "This is over," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Ethan and the shattered remnants of their relationship behind. As she stepped into the cool night air, a wave of clarity washed over her. For the first time in years, Naomi felt truly free. It was time to take back control of her life, and she knew exactly where to start. Naomi felt her cheeks burn as Ethan's venomous words echoed across the room. "Better than me because of your daddy's money? You're pathetic." The restaurant fell into stunned silence, all eyes turning toward their table. Humiliation threatened to overwhelm her, but Naomi refused to shrink under his glare. Instead, she held her head high, her voice steady but firm. "This isn't about money, Ethan. It's about respect. And it's clear I'm not going to find that here." Ethan's face twisted with fury. Without warning, he grabbed the dessert plate in front of him, a meticulously crafted chocolate tart, and hurled it at her. The plate shattered on impact, the dessert splattering across her dress and face. Gasps rippled through the room as diners recoiled in shock. Naomi sat frozen for a moment, the remnants of the tart sliding down her cheek. Then, slowly, she stood. The humiliation she had felt moments earlier was gone, replaced by calm determination. She reached for her napkin and wiped her face with deliberate precision. "This is over," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the silence. She turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Ethan and the shattered remnants of their relationship behind. As she stepped into the cool night air, a sense of clarity washed over her. For the first time in years, Naomi felt truly free. It was time to take back control of her life, and she knew exactly where to begin. Naomi's heels echoed against the marble floors of her parents' home, each step contrasting sharply with the deafening silence in her mind. She clutched her purse tightly, her dress still stained with the remnants of the chocolate tart Ethan had hurled at her. The humiliation of the night lingered, but beneath it simmered something far stronger. Resolve. The grand double doors opened before she could reach for the handle. Her mother, Vivian, stood in the doorway, her sharp eyes scanning Naomi from head to toe. Typically poised and elegant, Vivian's expression softened with concern as she took in her daughter's disheveled state. "Naomi," Vivian said, stepping aside to let her in. "What happened?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. She walked past her mother into the foyer, the familiar scent of lavender and polished wood enveloping her. For the first time in what felt like years, she allowed herself to relax, her shoulders sagging under the weight of exhaustion. Her father, Victor, appeared at the top of the staircase, his tie loosened and a book in hand. Seeing Naomi, he froze, concern replacing his usual stern expression. He quickly descended the stairs. "Naomi," he said, his voice steady yet warm. "Are you all right?" Naomi took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. "No, Dad? I'm not." Vivian and Victor exchanged a worried glance before guiding her into the living room. The room was as familiar as Naomi's own reflection. Plush armchairs, the soft glow of the fireplace, and framed photographs chronicling their family's milestones. It was a space of comfort and safety, a stark contrast to the chaos she had left behind. Naomi recounted the events of the evening, sparing no detail. She told them everything, from Ethan's growing hostility to the explosive scene at the restaurant. By the time she finished, her hands were trembling and tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. "I don't know how I let it get this bad," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I kept telling myself things would get better, that I just needed to try harder. But I can't anymore. I'm done." Vivian reached across the table, placing a steady hand over Naomi's. "You don't need to do this alone," she said gently. "We're here for you, whatever you need." Victor nodded, his jaw tight with anger. "You've put up with more than anyone should. It's time to take back control of your life." Their words, simple yet sincere, felt like a lifeline. For so long, Naomi had convinced herself that admitting she needed help was a sign of failure. But here, surrounded by her family's warmth, she realized how wrong she had been. The next morning, Naomi awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside her childhood bedroom window. The room looked exactly as she had left it years ago, down to the neatly arranged bookshelves and framed photos from her college graduation. Sitting up slowly, the events of the previous night flooded back with painful clarity. But alongside the pain was a newfound sense of purpose. For too long, she had allowed Ethan to dictate her life, undermine her confidence, and isolate her from the people who loved her. That ended now. Naomi dressed in a simple blouse and slacks she found in her old closet and made her way downstairs. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen, where her parents greeted her with warm smiles. Their presence bolstered her resolve. Over breakfast, Victor laid out a plan. "I'll connect you with our attorney," he said decisively. "She's handled cases like this before. We'll make sure Ethan doesn't get away with anything." Naomi nodded, gratitude filling her chest. "I also need to get back to work," she said firmly. "I've let this distract me for too long. It's time to refocus." Vivian placed a comforting hand on Naomi's shoulder. "Take it one step at a time, sweetheart. You don't have to rebuild everything overnight." Naomi smiled, feeling a glimmer of hope. For the first time in years, she could see the path forward. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was ready to reclaim her life. Naomi took a deep breath and spoke firmly. "I also need to get back to work. I've been distracted for too long, and it's time to refocus." Vivian placed a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Take it one step at a time, Naomi. You don't have to rebuild everything overnight." The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Naomi reached out to a divorce attorney her father had recommended, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Karen Blake. They arranged to meet the following morning to discuss her case. That evening, as Naomi sat with her parents in the living room, a wave of guilt washed over her. She thought about the years she had distanced herself from them, prioritizing a man who had done nothing but tear her down. "I'm sorry," Naomi said suddenly, her voice breaking, "for shutting you out, for not listening when you tried to warn me." Vivian moved to sit beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You don't need to apologize, Naomi. You did what you thought was right at the time. What matters is that you're here now." Victor nodded from his armchair, his jaw tight with emotion. "You've always been strong, Naomi, stronger than you realize, and now you're taking that strength back." Their words were a lifeline, bolstering her with a sense of determination she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in what seemed like forever, Naomi allowed herself to hope for a better future, one where she was in control of her own life. The next morning, Naomi arrived at Karen Blake's sleek, modern office in the heart of the city. Karen greeted her with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. "Let's get started," Karen said, motioning for Naomi to sit. "Tell me everything." Naomi recounted her marriage to Ethan, from the early days of his charm to the growing hostility and financial deceit that followed. Karen listened intently, jotting down detailed notes. When Naomi finished, Karen leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "You have a strong case," she said. "We'll gather evidence of financial exploitation, emotional abuse, and any other misconduct. Ethan might fight back, but I assure you, we'll be prepared." Relief washed over Naomi. For the first time since her marriage began unraveling, she felt like she had an ally, someone who believed in her and was ready to fight for her. Over the next few days, Naomi began taking small but meaningful steps to reclaim her life. She reconnected with Clara, who welcomed her back with open arms, and reached out to colleagues she had distanced herself from. She threw herself back into her work, rediscovering the passion that had once driven her. But the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Naomi knew Ethan wouldn't let go without a fight. Yet as she stood in her parents' foyer one evening, gazing out at the twinkling city lights, she felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced in years. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was taking control. Step by step, piece by piece, Naomi felt herself coming alive again. Naomi sat at her desk in her office, her fingers drumming on the polished wood surface. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, but it did little to ease the tension knotted in her shoulders. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of legal meetings, rekindling old friendships and re-establishing her presence at work. Despite her progress, the specter of her marriage still loomed. She knew Ethan would eventually come for her, and when he did, she had to be ready. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. The caller ID made her stomach tighten. Ethan. She stared at the screen for a moment, debating whether to answer. Finally, with a deep breath, she swiped to accept the call. Naomi, Ethan said, his voice sharp, the usual veneer of charm stripped away. We need to talk. There's nothing left to discuss, she replied evenly, though her pulse quickened. Oh, I think there is, he snapped. You think you can just walk away from this marriage and take everything with you? You're out of your mind. Naomi's grip on the phone tightened. I'm not taking anything that doesn't belong to me, Ethan. You've exploited me for years, and it's over. If you have something to say, you can go through my attorney. I'm not letting some lawyer dictate my life, he growled. Meet me tonight. You owe me that much. Naomi hesitated. Every instinct told her to refuse, but a part of her wanted to face him, to confront him head on. Fine, she said at last, but we'll meet in public. They agreed on a neutral location, a cafe in the city center. Naomi arrived early, choosing a table by the window where she could see the street outside. Her heart pounded as she waited, but she steadied herself, reminding herself how far she had come. When Ethan arrived, he looked every bit the polished professional, but his eyes betrayed his simmering anger. He sat across from her, folding his hands on the table as though trying to compose himself. This isn't how it's supposed to be, he said, his tone deceptively calm. We're supposed to be a team. A team, Naomi echoed, incredulous. You've spent our entire marriage tearing me down. Naomi's voice didn't waver as she stared Ethan down. Isolating me? Stealing from me? That's not a team, Ethan. That's control. Ethan's jaw tightened, his composure cracking. I did what I had to do to keep us afloat. You've had everything handed to you on a silver platter, Naomi. I had to work for everything I have. And you think that justifies what you've done? She shot back. You used me, my money, my connections, my reputation, and you still weren't satisfied. Ethan's mask of calm shattered. His voice rose, sharp and venomous. You're delusional. I built this life for us while you played at being some corporate savior. You're nothing without me. Naomi's hands trembled beneath the table, but she refused to let him see her fear. She met his glare head on, her voice unwavering. You're wrong, Ethan. I was someone before you, and I'll still be someone long after you're gone. You don't define me. Ethan's face darkened, and for a moment Naomi thought he might lash out. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, a bitter smile curling his lips. You'll regret this, Naomi. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. I'll ruin you. She stood, meeting his gaze with quiet defiance. Do your worst. I'm done being afraid of you. Without waiting for his response, Naomi turned and walked out of the cafe, her heart racing. She knew Ethan wouldn't back down easily, but for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever came next. That evening, Naomi sat in Karen Blake's office, recounting the confrontation. Karen listened carefully, her sharp eyes narrowing as Naomi described Ethan's threats. We need to document this, Karen said, jotting notes in her leather planner. Every conversation, every incident. If he tries anything, we'll be ready. Naomi nodded, grateful for Karen's unwavering support. The attorney had been a lifeline, guiding her through the legal maze with precision and empathy. Do you think he'll follow through on his threats? Naomi asked, her voice quieter than she intended. Karen looked up, her expression serious. Men like Ethan don't handle losing control well. He'll try to intimidate you, maybe even manipulate the narrative to paint himself as the victim. But we have the truth on our side, and we'll use it. Naomi left the office with a renewed sense of determination. She wasn't the same woman who had endured years of Ethan's manipulation. She was stronger now, more resolute, and she wouldn't let him dictate her life any longer. The next few days were tense. Ethan began a smear campaign, spreading rumors about Naomi among mutual acquaintances. He painted her as selfish and ungrateful, claiming she had abandoned him. Naomi heard the whispers and saw the skeptical looks when she walked into meetings or events. It stung, but she refused to let it shake her. Instead, she focused on her work and the people who truly mattered. Clara became a constant presence, offering her unwavering support while her parents stood by her, their home a safe haven when the stress became overwhelming. One afternoon, Naomi received an email from Karen. Attached was a file containing evidence of Ethan's financial misconduct, documents showing how he had funneled money from their accounts to fund his own ventures. Karen had also uncovered messages that revealed his attempts to manipulate mutual friends and colleagues. Naomi stared at the file, anger and relief washing over her in equal measure. This was the proof she needed, not just for the divorce proceedings but for herself. It validated everything she had endured, every moment she had doubted her own perception of reality. As the legal case against Ethan began to take shape, Naomi felt a shift within her. She was no longer a victim, no longer the woman who had silently endured years of emotional abuse. She was reclaiming her narrative, her power, her life. The courthouse loomed before her, an imposing building of stone and glass, its towering facade a symbol of justice. Naomi stood at the entrance, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering evidence, recounting years of manipulation, and steeling herself for the inevitable battle. Today marked the start of the final phase, the divorce hearing. Her parents flanked her, their presence steadying. Vivian reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You've got this, Naomi. Stay strong." Victor nodded, his stern expression softening as he met his daughter's eyes. "This is the end of the road for him. You've already won by taking back your life." Naomi nodded, drawing strength from their words. She took a deep breath and stepped through the heavy doors, her heels clicking against the polished floors. Karen was waiting for her inside, a beacon of calm amidst the storm. "Naomi," Karen greeted her, her tone professional yet warm. "Are you ready?" Naomi straightened her shoulders, determination coursing through her. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm ready." "Yes," Naomi replied, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I'm ready." As they entered the courtroom, Naomi's eyes immediately landed on Ethan, seated at the defendant's table. As always, he was impeccably dressed, but there was a tension in his posture and a flicker of unease in his eyes. For a brief moment, their gazes met, and Naomi saw the man who had once swept her off her feet. But that image was quickly replaced by the reality of who he had become, or perhaps who he had always been. The proceedings began with opening statements, each side laying out their case. Karen Blake spoke with precision and confidence, presenting compelling evidence of Ethan's financial misconduct, emotional abuse, and manipulation. Naomi watched as her lawyer methodically dismantled the facade Ethan had worked so hard to maintain. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he painted himself as the victim. He claimed that Naomi had neglected their marriage, prioritized her career over their relationship, and abandoned him without warning. His voice was calm, almost pleading, as he spun his narrative. Naomi felt anger simmer within her, but kept her composure. She recognized his performance for what it was, a last-ditch effort to control the story and cast himself as the wronged party. But she also knew the truth was on her side. When it was her turn to testify, Naomi took a deep breath and stepped onto the witness stand. Her voice remained steady as she recounted years of subtle criticism, isolation from friends and family, financial exploitation, and the explosive confrontation at the restaurant. "I stayed because I believed things would get better," she said, her voice firm but tinged with emotion. "I thought if I worked harder, if I gave more of myself, it would save our marriage. But I realized no amount of effort could change someone who didn't want to change. I deserve better. And today I'm taking the first step toward building the life I deserve." The courtroom was silent as Naomi finished. Even Ethan, who had spent much of the hearing glaring at Karen or scribbling notes, seemed momentarily disarmed. The judge adjourned the proceedings, announcing that a decision would be rendered the following week. As Naomi walked out of the courtroom, she felt a strange calm settle over her. The outcome was no longer in her hands, but she knew she had done everything she could. The week passed in a blur. Naomi threw herself into her work, rediscovering joy in the projects she had once loved. She spent evenings with her parents, enjoying simple dinners and the warmth of their company. Clara became a constant presence, their conversations filled with laughter and the ease of old friendship. When the day of the ruling arrived, Naomi returned to the courthouse with Karen and her parents by her side. The judge's decision was swift and decisive. Naomi would retain full ownership of her assets, including her family's business interests. Ethan's claims were dismissed, and he was ordered to repay a portion of the funds he had misappropriated. The weight of the decision hit Naomi like a tidal wave. Relief, vindication, and a profound sense of closure washed over her as the judge's words sank in. She had won, not just the legal battle, but her freedom. Outside the courthouse, the sun shone brightly, a stark contrast to the storm that had loomed over her life for so long. Her parents embraced her, their pride unmistakable. "You did it," Vivian said, tears glistening in her eyes. "You took your life back." Victor rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "This is just the beginning, Naomi. You've got a whole future ahead of you." Naomi smiled, her chest swelling with hope. For the first time in years, the horizon felt wide open, filled with possibility. In the weeks that followed, Naomi began rebuilding her life, piece by piece. She reconnected with old colleagues, strengthening her professional network and personal relationships. At work, she spearheaded a new initiative focused on mentoring young professionals from underrepresented backgrounds, channeling her experiences into something meaningful. She also launched a foundation to support women who had faced emotional and financial abuse. The foundation quickly gained traction, with Naomi sharing her story through interviews and speaking engagements. Her vulnerability and resilience resonated with countless others, inspiring them to find their own strength. Through it all, Naomi never lost sight of the journey that had brought her here. The pain, the betrayal, and the moments of doubt, they had shaped her, but didn't define her. She was stronger, wiser, and unafraid to take up space in the world. Naomi stood on the balcony of her apartment one evening, gazing at the city lights twinkling in the distance. She raised a glass of wine to the night sky, a quiet toast to her journey. "To new beginnings," she whispered, her voice steady and sure. The scars of the past would always remain, but they no longer controlled her. She was free, free to live, to dream, and to embrace the life she had fought so hard to reclaim, and she was just getting started. Naomi never lost sight of the journey that had brought her to this moment. The pain, the betrayal, and the moments of doubt, they had shaped her, but they no longer defined her. She was no longer the woman who dimmed her light to let someone else shine. She was stronger, wiser, and unapologetically herself. One evening, Naomi sat on the balcony of her apartment, gazing out at the city skyline. A sense of peace washed over her, a feeling she hadn't known in years. The past was behind her, and the future stretched out before her like an uncharted map. She raised her glass of wine to the night sky, offering a quiet toast to her journey. She had faced the storm and emerged stronger. Now it was time to embrace the life she was meant to live. Leaning against the railing, she let the cool evening breeze brush against her skin. The city sprawled out before her, a sea of lights and energy that buzzed with possibility. For years, she had felt trapped, suffocated by her marriage and the weight of expectations. Now, she stood on the edge of a new chapter, her life finally her own. The foundation Naomi had launched was thriving. Emails poured in daily from women sharing their stories, seeking advice, and expressing gratitude for the resources her team had made available. Each message reminded her why she had chosen this path. Her pain, once a source of shame, had become a beacon of hope for others. That evening, Naomi hosted an event to celebrate the foundation's success. Her parents, Clara, and her closest supporters were in attendance, along with women whose lives had been transformed by the foundation's programs. The event was held at Luna Vista, a breathtaking rooftop venue adorned with lush greenery and twinkling fairy lights. Guests arrived dressed in elegant attire, the soft hum of conversation blending with the gentle strains of a jazz quartet. Naomi moved through the crowd with ease, greeting each attendee with a warm smile. Confidence radiated from her as she exchanged stories and listened to the heartfelt words of gratitude from those the foundation had helped. As she chatted with a group of guests, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning, she saw Clara grinning at her, a glass of champagne in hand. "You've outdone yourself, Naomi," Clara said, her eyes scanning the beautifully decorated space. "This is incredible." Naomi laughed and clinked her glass against Clara's. It's not just me. Everyone here played a part. This foundation wouldn't exist without the support of people like you. Clara's expression softened. You know, it's amazing to see you like this, strong, happy, free. I've missed this version of you. Naomi smiled, the words sinking in. For so long she had felt like a shadow of herself. Now she was rediscovering the woman she had always been. I've missed her too, Naomi admitted. The evening unfolded seamlessly. Guests mingled, shared stories, and formed connections. At one point, Naomi took the stage, her voice steady as she thanked everyone for their support and spoke about the foundation's mission. She shared pieces of her journey, her vulnerability resonating with the room. By the time she finished, the applause was deafening. As the night wound down, Naomi stepped onto the rooftop terrace, the glittering skyline stretching out before her. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see her mother, Vivian, approaching with a soft smile on her lips. You were wonderful tonight, Vivian said, stepping beside her. Your father and I couldn't be prouder. A lump formed in Naomi's throat. Thank you, Mom, for everything, for standing by me, even when I didn't make it easy. Vivian reached for her hand, her grip firm but gentle. You've always been strong, Naomi, even when you didn't see it. Watching you take back your life has been one of my greatest joys. Naomi nodded, tears threatening to spill. I couldn't have done it without you and Dad. I felt so lost for so long, but you never gave up on me. Vivian's smile deepened, her eyes shining. That's what family is for. And now you're building a new family, a community of women who see their strength reflected in yours. That's something to be proud of. Naomi leaned against her mother's shoulder, the two of them gazing out at the city in comfortable silence. The days that followed were filled with activity. The foundation continued to grow, and Naomi's career flourished as she tackled new challenges with renewed purpose. She began traveling, exploring the cultures and cuisines she had always dreamed of experiencing. Each trip brought fresh inspiration, new ideas for the foundation, and a deeper appreciation for her own resilience. In Morocco, she marveled at the vibrant markets and shared meals with local women who spoke of their own triumphs and struggles. In Japan, she immersed herself in the art of quiet reflection, finding peace in tranquil gardens and traditional tea ceremonies. Every journey was a step toward healing and a celebration of the life she was reclaiming. Back home, Naomi's apartment became a haven of warmth and creativity. The walls were adorned with photos and souvenirs from her travels, each one a testament to the path she had walked. The woman who stared back at her in the mirror each morning was no longer haunted by self-doubt. She was strong, confident, and unapologetically herself. One evening, Naomi sat on her balcony, reviewing plans for the foundation's next initiative. She received an email from Clara with the subject line, "Look at you." Curious, Naomi opened it and found a link to a news article. The headline read, "From Survivor to Leader, Naomi Pierce on Rebuilding a Life of Strength and Purpose." As she read, Naomi felt a swell of pride, not for the recognition, but for the impact she was making. Her story was no longer a source of pain. It was a source of hope. Naomi raised her glass to the skyline, a quiet toast to the journey that had brought her here. To new beginnings, she whispered. The scars of the past would always remain, but they no longer defined her. Naomi was free to live, to dream, and to embrace the life she had fought so hard to reclaim. And she was just getting started. Naomi found peace in the tranquil gardens and tea ceremonies of Japan, every journey becoming a step toward healing and a celebration of the life she was reclaiming. Back home, her apartment had transformed into a haven of warmth and creativity. The walls were adorned with photos and souvenirs from her travels, each one a poignant reminder of the path she had walked. The woman staring back at her in the mirror each morning was no longer burdened by self-doubt. She was strong, confident, and unapologetically herself. One evening, as Naomi sat at her desk reviewing plans for the foundation's next initiative, she noticed an email from Clara. The subject line read, "Look at you." Curious, Naomi clicked it open and found a link to a news article. The headline read, "From Survivor to Leader, Naomi Pierce on Rebuilding a Life of Strength and Purpose." The article detailed Naomi's journey, her work with the foundation, and her commitment to empowering women. As she read, a swell of pride filled her, not for the recognition but for the impact she was making. Her story was no longer a source of pain, it had become a beacon of hope. That night, Naomi stepped onto her balcony, a glass of wine in hand. The city lights twinkled like 1,000 tiny promises, each one a testament to the endless possibilities ahead. She thought about the woman she had been when she first met Ethan. Bright-eyed and hopeful, but uncertain of her worth. She thought about the years she had spent dimming her light to let someone else shine. And finally, she thought about the woman she was now, strong, independent, and unafraid to take up space in the world. Naomi raised her glass to the skyline. "To new beginnings," she whispered, her voice steady and sure. As she sipped her wine, a sense of peace settled over her. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined her. Naomi was free to live, to love, to dream. And she was just getting started. Thank you for finishing this story. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on more inspirational and heartfelt content. If you enjoyed this video, share it with your friends. Maybe it will encourage someone else too. And check out our other stories for even more amazing journeys. See you soon.